girl, you the man. And she love me when I'm in it. And she never be pretending. Nothing that's friend. She gon' tell you what she bought it. Cause she know you can't afford.
Hi, welcome to the E-Spot with Camille. I am your host, Camille Cower, and today we are joined by Maya Brooks, who is a curator at the Northland Museum of Art here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I am so excited to have this conversation with you because I have been in love with all the recent exhibits that are at the museum, and so I want to find out more about your position, your place in all of the different exhibits, and actually rewind. I want to know how you got started in the art world. Like, what was your, when did you decide I need to work in the art field?
Yeah, so nice to meet you. Thank you so much again for joining me too and having this conversation. So currently I am the Mellon Foundation Assistant Curator at the North Carolina Museum of Art, but my interest in the field goes way back to when I was actually 14. So I was a freshman in high school and I took this class called Human Geography. And our textbook, they listed these different like fields you could go into with human geography or like related to human geography. And one of them was anthropology. So I decided I'm going to be an anthropologist. That's it. That was it for me when I was 14. And then from there, I kind of researched what I could do with anthropology, and museum work was like one of the primary jobs you could get. And so I was just like, okay, I'm gonna be a museum curator. I'm gonna be an anthropologist. I'm gonna be a museum curator, and I'm gonna go to UNC Chapel Hill. I had so much like focus and so much intention with that. And that's exactly what happened. I got into UNC and I got an anthropology degree, and then I went straight to grad school and got my master's in history. And then now I'm a curator at the museum.
So rewind a little bit. When you were telling your friends or family about your goal, very not always known to be a very lucrative goal, but definitely one at 14, maybe, did you have a lot of support, or were they like, maybe get a backup just in case, or were they all for it, all hands in?
They definitely had their worries, especially my mom. My mother was like, I was on the engineering track in high school and the culinary track. I actually wanted to be a chef before I wanted to be a
Wait,
curator.
where's the school that you went to with all these different options? And first, I was on the engineer track. Like,
yeah,
wow.
it was a big school in Georgia. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia originally.
Okay.
And it's a large school that had these different like tech or like career paths you could take classes
Oh,
for.
fantastic.
Yeah, so I took culinary classes and I took engineering classes. And so my mom was like, well, you're really good in your engineering classes. Why don't you become an engineer? And I was like, Mom, like, I'm bad at math. Like, I'm never going to be an
You're
engineer,
like,
girl.
hold up. Yeah.
Like, that's not going to work. So then I just started thinking, like, I had always been good at history. I had always loved history for some reason. And my family knew that. So they trusted me. Like, they trusted my intuition. They trusted me in being able to decide what I wanted to do for myself.
Mm-hmm.
But they were very like, we don't know what anthropology is. We don't know what Maya wants to be. They still don't know what I do for a living. They just know that, like, I've gotten press, or like they've seen that I've like been in certain magazines and stuff like that, and they're like proud of me, but they're also just like, Maya does something in history, or Maya digs up bones. I'm like, that's not what I do at all.
So for those that may not know, what exactly do you do, and what was your studies like to prepare you for this?
Yeah, so anthropology is the study of culture. And so I study people and really these systems that create our lives, right? So like systems that influence us and how we move day to day, systems that influence the options we get as, we go through life. And so my studies included a lot of writing, thinking about history, thinking about culture, thinking about just all the things that make us people, right? And so then applying that to the museum field, now I'm a curator and I curate these shows that deal with themes from our life. So for instance, my first show was about coming of age. So I took this deep dive into what coming of age means across the globe and like what that means for us as community, what that means for us as individuals. So things like that kind of come up again and again throughout this field and throughout my work.
Oh, that's fantastic. So that was your first one. Which one of your different shows, I know I'm getting ready to ask you choose your favorite baby, but which one of your shows was the most surprising for you, or that you felt the most proud from?
I think that first one, To Be Young, just was amazing because it was different for me because I started this job remotely. And usually in the museum field, like you're around the work all the time. You're around the artists, you're around the artwork. you're there. And so I had to plan this exhibition completely remotely from my computer at home, which was the hardest thing to do.
I can imagine because art is very 3D in a way, like especially depending on what kind of art you're working with. But
Exactly. And like not knowing what size things were, like not knowing the
mm,
texture of things. So like not even really knowing the color. Like you can't really get the color from the computer that it is in person. So like it was difficult, but we did it. We did it, and it
so
came
this
out
sounds like this all happened during the pandemic. So how long have you been a curator?
Yeah, so I've been an art curator for a year and a half,
Okay.
almost. But I've done other curatorial work or other museum work before that. So like
Mhm.
I worked at the Harvey B. Gantt Center in Charlotte, North
Okay.
Carolina. I was an intern and I did digital humanities work. So did a digital project for them. I worked in a small gallery at the North Carolina collection at UNC. So I made like smaller exhibitions about UNC history and stuff like that too earlier in my career.
Oh, that sounds amazing. So with the the show that is going on currently that you're how did that come about, like where, and even working with the Mellon, like all of that, like how did you start working at the North Carolina Museum of Art, and how does that hall fall apart, or not fall apart, but how did that all come together?
So yeah, so I applied for this job the month before I graduated from my master's program. And so it was like, oh no, I didn't apply for it. Sorry, I got the job a month before I graduated from my master's program. I applied for it that winter.
Oh, okay.
And it was a long process. Yeah, it's like these state jobs are like months of like processing and like talking to different people, having different meetings. So it was a long process. They had a posting about the job, and I applied and sent my resume in and gave my portfolio to someone. And I was like, please, I'm in grad school. I just need an opportunity. There aren't a lot of entry level museum jobs. So like my assistant job is the first time they've ever had an assistant curator position at the museum.
Okay.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of entry level. Like you have to either like kind of know someone to get into museum work, or have to kind of work your way up through a museum to usually get into these positions. So it's really difficult. So I got really kind of lucky, kind of fortunate in order to be able to apply to this job and then get it. It was like 2 interviews. It was a lot. But now that we're here, it's been like really fun, really exciting, really, really worthwhile work, honestly.
Yeah, now I also think about the fact that with a master's degree, it's an entry level position. So, what is your goal as far as where do you see yourself going with your career?
So I definitely see myself at least getting to the full curator position. So there's these different levels of curatorial work. So there's assistant curators, there are associate curators, which is the next step up from my position, and then there are full curators. And usually what separates the different levels is usually education. Like to be a full curator, you usually have to have a PhD. Not so much in contemporary art, which is my focus. Like a lot of contemporary curators don't have PhDs, but some institutions do require it to even get an interview for the job. A lot of the time, also, you have to be published. Like you have to say that you've been published or you've published a catalog for a show. There are these different parameters. There's a lot with museums and access that I could get into, but
I
yeah, those
know,
are
like I'm
usually.
just thinking about how difficult that has to be for especially people of color, because a lot of times we may be only second or third generation to graduate from college and to take that leap into a career that is such a small group to get into. And like you mentioned earlier, usually you have to know someone that knows someone that knows someone, and we may not have that access. Because I know there's been a lot of press, or there was a lot of press when the Harlem Museum had hired a curator that wasn't a person of color, and it showed in the work that was being seen there. I think I can't remember it all now because this was a few years back, but it brought up the fact that it's one of those areas that there isn't really a pipeline for that opportunity for people of color to really go in that direction, because it's such a big leap of faith that you'll get a position when there's not many that available, because there's not many museums in the first place. And then I know this is in North Carolina. There's only one major North Carolina art museum, and I don't know how far you'd have to go to get to the next one. But getting back to what you're doing now, because for those that may be thinking of going this path, you have a really great exhibit going right now, and it's focused on North Carolina artists as well as some other artists that are going on right now. So can you share a little bit about what people can expect from your latest show that you have going on at the Museum of Art?
Yes, so it's called NC Artist Connections, and it features 3 different art collectives and artists. So Stephen Hayes, Hong Trong, and the Beautiful Project. And we really wanted to set out to do an exhibition that connected the museum to these contemporary artists, and especially local artists, to show that we're all in community together, that we are all existing in this space together, and that we're working towards becoming more representative in our museum displays, as well as equitable in terms of representation, of course, with regard to race, gender, intersectionality. So just getting more people that are intersectional in identity into the museum. It has been our large focus this past year and a half as we gear up towards rethinking our collection, especially the contemporary collection, because we are able to do so much work around living artists and bringing living artists into the space and having them be able to describe their work and talk about their work, and then also respond to certain aspects of our collection. So 2 of the artists, Stephen Hayes and Hong Trong, actually used works from our collection to enhance their installation. So for instance, Stephen Hayes uses some of our photography, a lot of our portraiture in his side. It's beautiful, the balance between the black and white photographs, and then his sculpture pieces, and then his mixed media pieces that he has. And then Hong Trong used our large neon sign from Tavares Strawn next to her pieces to kind of talk about belonging and this idea of placing yourself in history. So then there's...
And the colors work so perfectly too, with the pink. Right? I don't even know how to describe hers because it's on fabric, but it works so perfectly with the pink sign, and my favorite color is pink. So that was I'm in my place. Although most of her work is black and white, but there's this, it's the nice contrast of it all. I do have to say it works so perfectly.
It's really beautiful. I love the composition of her work. And yes, so what she did is she printed this photograph on silk. So it's actually a very large piece of silk that pink and the photograph of the Asian organization is on.
And then the letter in the background.
I
attempted to read it, but when I spoke with her, I meant to ask her about that and totally forgot what was who was the source of that letter, because it is from the 1960s. Do you have any insight about that you could share? Or
yeah, the organization, it's a Asian woman-led political organization, and they're the ones that are photographed in the front. And I think it's a letter from that organization that was penned by them. That's what a lot of her work in that side is doing, is kind of relaying some of these organizations and the demands they were making, the stances they were taking during those resistance movements in the 1960s and 1970s.
No, and I noticed with her work as well as with Stephen Hayes' work, it was very political in the sense that they both were making kind of a very obvious statement with what their pieces represented. With Stephen Hayes, him having the bullet casings as part of his work and the hands kind of coming through, and I think it was called Rebirth. And then with the bust with their eyes closed, which could mean maybe they're resting, they're tired, or it could be that it's like an autopsy thing. It was... I will speak to him and find out exactly what his thoughts were behind it, or unless you want to share, and spoiler alert. But with the Beautiful Project, it was completely different. It was just one of those really kind of, I want everyone to come and see this. So I'm curious, when you were choosing these different artists and having these so completely different, but yet they work so well together, what was your thoughts when you reached out to these different artists, or when you were even recruiting for this show? What made it stand out that they would work so perfectly together? I know you said you were doing it digitally, but no one could tell.
Thank you, because that was the hardest part. So I was actually a co-curator on the show. So the lead curator at first was Jen Dezo, who was our curator of modern and contemporary art. And so she had these artists in mind, and then we came up together to approach them. And we had already had certain kind of aspects of what they would do in mind, but we left it kind of open to their interpretation. And it ended up working so well on its own, honestly. Like
Mm-hmm.
the threads that we're able to make as curators is often organic. And so I love that they are so different, but there are these different themes that like I've chosen to take out of them. So like one of them being resistance, one of them being this kind of political kind of aspect, one of them being identity. Another one is time. And then the last one that I kind of picked up on was like this familiarity, the sense of self, the sense of collective. So there are these different threads that run through all of them. But yeah, it was a choice to just kind of branch out to these different local artists that we kind of had either heard of or knew about, had wanted to work with, but didn't have the right time, but now is the right time. So that was pretty much the process for that.
Yeah, and see, I was wondering if there was some connection because I know that one of them is a professor at UNC. So I didn't know if you by chance happened to have her as a teacher beforehand, because that would be a full circle moment in a way, but not so much, no.
Not so much, but the funny
Yeah.
thing is, I do know someone from the Beautiful Project. She actually filmed my probate in college, and she's
Oh,
one of the
wow.
artists featured in the Beautiful Project. She's one of the self-portraits that we have.
Oh,
So,
see,
yeah.
so funny enough, speaking on that same element, I think it was like 2018 or 2019. My daughter and I had our pictures done, our portraits done by the Beautiful Project at Black August in the Park, like their first event. And so when I was looking up your past emails, or I think somebody's from Northland Museum's past emails, that was one of the things that popped up, and I was like, huh. I knew that name sounded familiar, but Beautiful Project, who wouldn't want to remember that? And then with Stephen, a long time ago, around the same time, actually, I went to an event at WREL and I saw his artwork there, and I was just like, ooh, this is so cool. And I took pictures, and those are the pictures I actually used to promote the conversation I'm going to have with him, because I was like, what are the odds? Granted, I am an artist kid, so I notice art and take pictures of it all the time. But I was like, when I was Googling him, I was like, wait, I know his work, and was able to find those pictures in my iCloud. And so I was just like really surprised in this area. Yeah, like it really needs to a better connection with artists where they all know each other better, or even being more collective in that sense. But I hadn't met them in person before, and so I'm excited about that this now exhibit coming together is bringing that together as well. And I know this Saturday you have an event happening. Can you share a little bit about that as well?
Yeah,
Speaking
so
of bringing people together.
I'm excited for this one because this idea came out of our performing arts director, Moses Alexander Green. And so he actually put this together with the Beautiful Project and North Carolina Central University. They have a dance team that is going to come and perform. And so they're going to be doing these performances on Saturday. And they're actually going to use the Beautiful Project's video work as like projections on their bodies as they move. And I was there while they were practicing, and I was like, oh, this is about to be some different.
Yeah, so is this indoors?
Yeah, so it will be
Okay.
indoors. It will actually be in the galleries where the Beautiful Project's installation is in the video. So like the dead center as soon as you come down the stairs in East Building.
Okay, that explains why it's such a broad area to look, because I was like, the chairs are really far back, but it makes sense so you can see all the different three angles, because there are sometimes when it's all the exact same focal point, and then there's different times where camera B, camera C is a little different, and you can kind of see the different parts of what they're saying and so on. It's a really great show and so well thought out and just really beautiful. I'm really glad that the North Carolina Museum of Art did this exhibit. It's really exciting, and you guys have a new exhibit coming up on October 24th. Anything you can share about that?
That one is going to be a wonderful show. It's one of our larger shows, so we usually have these larger rotations in our gallery in this building, and that show is being curated by Michelle Frederick, who is our associate curator of European art here at the museum. My great colleague, I love her to death, and she is so excited. Like, the show is going to be so colorful because it's like you can do so much more, because it's like pop arty, it's like art deco,
Art Deco.
So it's going to be more decorative than we've ever done at the museum. Like normally, when you think of a museum, you think of like the white walls, kind of plain frames, but in there they have like the walls painted. There's all this beautiful lace work around. They have wallpaper everywhere. And then what you just showed was those different portraits. So we do have like community portraits going to be a part of it. So I'm really excited.
And those were all created by local artists, I would like to mention as well. I'm sure at a later date I can give more information because I won't put you completely on the spot. But I also heard, because I stalk my guests before I interview them. Well, in your case, it was Northland Museum of Art, and they were tagged by Alfonso Mucho's account. And they also described that the museum's going to have different foods and cocktails that kind of also pair well with the art. So be prepared for that. Come ready to have lunch or brunch when you do come to see the exhibit that opens on October 23rd, because there's going to be a lot of new different things that they're doing to celebrate Alfonso Mucho. So I'm excited because I love Art Deco. I just love everything colorful and bright. And I love that you guys had local artists commissioned to do their own portfolios in his style. And they're so different yet so beautiful.
Yes, that was actually an idea by our one of our PR managers, Kat Harding. That was her idea. And so it's like, that I think is like top notch PR. Like, yes, like let's get people involved in the show too. Cause like, that's something that I appreciate about our museum, is that we do love to involve the public in what we're doing. And I think, the menu change, I'm so excited because they always do that. So they match the menu at our cafe to whatever the Gallery 1 show is. Mm-hmm. So like last time it was Mediterranean based because our show was mummies and Egyptian, of course. So we had Mediterranean inspired food, but this time I think they're doing Parisian kind of French cuisine.
I can't wait.
I'm really excited.
Me too, because I actually grew up overseas, so it's like, French food? Count me in. I don't drink, so the cocktails, I'll just get the mocktail version, but I'm really excited about all of that you guys are doing. And I like also that with these different pieces, that because it does show the artist, that people can possibly see themselves as becoming artists, because representation is so important. And the last time I was there, I even mentioned like how great it would be that if they used little profile pictures of the artist, so people could see, oh, this art is made by someone that looks like me, when kids are coming in to do tours and so on, because they're so used to seeing predominantly men, and especially in historic times, because they were even taken away from the women artists that really did their work. Yes, I'm looking at you, Rodon, and because my name's Camille, I'm partial. So, but needless to say, thank you so much for being my guest. And if there's anything else you would like to share, please feel free to do so, and how people can stay in contact with what Northland Museum of Art is doing. And also, if you want to share your own personal socials as well, so people can keep up with all that you have to offer.
Yeah, thank you so much again for having me be a part of your show. You can always keep up with the museum via our website or via social media at NC Art Museum. You can also keep up with me there. I'm featured all the time on our social media, but also feel free to reach out to me at any point at the Muse Maya on social media. And the show, just wanted to make sure everybody knew how long the show will be open. NC Artist Connections will be open until February of 2022. So just making sure that everybody can come visit. It is free and open to the public. It is located in our East building. So,
which is the brick building that's kind of towards the back. In case you guys don't know which the East one was, because I was like, oh, I'm just like,
it is like East. A little.
I'm like, just tell me that it's the brick building. Yeah. All right, great. Well, thank you again for being my guest. I really appreciate this time with you, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. You have a great day too.